maybe a straw going from here.
Teachers
to here.
TV invited 4 members of the Design and Technology Department of Queen's Park Community School in North London to take part in a unique experiment. On one day, they were asked to test out a range of group work strategies designed to encourage students to collaborate, share ideas, and learn from one another.
Look at that old-fashioned teacher speaking there.
We showed them our record of their day, and together with Key Stage 3 strategy consultant Gareth Stevens, invited them to reflect on its implications.
Initial feedback, what do you think? How did you think the group work went? The experiment, as we called it in the first programme.
It was good, wasn't it? Yeah. I thought it was excellent.
I've enjoyed watching it. I certainly have learnt a lot from watching your 2 lessons. They're the sort of thing that I'd like to try.
I was watching yours, I was thinking, I want to get my hands on Jane's resources. And those cards, because that was a snapshot. It didn't actually explain the activities at length, did it? So it made you want to know what everyone was doing.
All the lessons were successful, weren't they? We all had successful lessons out of that idea. And from seeing it, I think, I want to try some of the other bits.
The students were very focused.
You say you want to try some of them again. I mean, what effect will it have on student achievement, do you think?
They're actually learning, they're doing. Yes. It's that idea that you don't have to have a recorded written outcome, that they were actively engaged and talking and using information, developing their communication skills, problem solving, negotiation. They were doing all those things.
First of all, I'm going to give you a card. It'll have a number on it. Mahali? Daniela? When I actually sorted out the numbers, what I started with was the CAT scores, the average CAT scores. And I looked at actually making 2 separate groups because I knew that I'd end up with 16 students. And I wanted a mix within both of the groups. Oh, right. A, of ability, B, gender, and C, culture. So I looked at all of those things and I mixed them up. I then gave them numbers according to alphabetical order.
All right, so they were none the wiser.
No.
What's interesting about that, if you've got the card system sorted out, you're not going to get any the kids aren't going to give any problem with it because it's just, to them, it's a number and all the ones get together or whatever. I'm not sure.
They don't know where it's going.
No, and they don't understand. If you just say, I want you to work with him. Yeah, that's right. So I think it was a good way of short-circuiting that and making, building more pace into the lessons.
Now, can you open the packs and distribute the yellow, the red and the blue to the other members? But the green person must be the person circled.
How well made and finished is the product?
Some debate we had earlier, we watched it, there was some talk about the colour-coded question sheets and they were, so that each student in the group got a different set of questions. Was that was planned? Did that have a positive impact?
We wanted to look at the different ways they were going to do the evaluation of the product and then they could sort of bring it all together in their group. So they each had a different angle to look at the product from. So I thought that was
Did
important.
that set them up for the specification as well?
Oh,
different angles?
That was it. That really made them think the specification through much more deeply than they would have otherwise done.
It tastes better in the fridge.
Oh yeah. It tastes better in the fridge though, but it doesn't have
It's better if it's cool, but it doesn't have to live in the fridge, does it?
See the hole? That's so bad shape to hold.
Watching the video, there was occasions when I could see myself stepping backwards.
Well, I saw you just standing and you could see you enjoying the background. You couldn't stop listening to yourself.
It looked like more.
There was that wonderful moment as well. The group were testing, what it was like to hold the drink holders.
Bottles, so.
And you seemed to be unsure. You felt like you wanted to intervene, I think, but you held back. I think you were quite skillful there.
Yes, I was watching. I think perhaps I was worried about things like the top coming off and an awful mess, a disaster, a physical disaster.
Aubrey, struck by the fact you said you didn't really try some of these strategies early in your career. I wonder, why that was.
I suppose I've always been a bit scared of doing something like that. I suppose most traditional teachers are kind of a bit of a control freak, and you want to make sure that things are going well and little realising how easily it is to control
Well, ironically, I think the group
it's,
is even more controlling.
Very ironically, that it kind of controls itself, and you don't have to be there on tenterhooks, you know, making sure that everything's going the way that you think you planned.
I think it was Aubrey that said this to me years ago. That idea of, you know, you don't always have to be doing. Sometimes I think you were observing me, and you said you don't always have to be doing. Sometimes you can stand back and just watch. You don't have to be constantly performing. And this type of group work actually really gives you that opportunity. And especially in DT, a practical subject, there are actually quite, you know, limited times when you can really do that, can't you? Because it's not that you're always standing in front teaching, but you're always involved.
Don't worry about it.
Yes, look how much you...
And Surgeon, the big issue seemed to be Josh.
Well, surprisingly, I mean, I wasn't expecting that Josh would take a leading role within his group, because he's quite withdrawn from the rest of the class, and he tends to concentrate on his... Well, doesn't tend to concentrate on his work. He tends to be quite disruptive. Where on this occasion, Josh was actually taking the leading role.
Do you think it's because he's like playing to the camera, or?
I mean, he knows how to play. He knows how to use his charm to manipulate. But at the same time, I mean, if that was the reason, at least he benefited in some way.
Well, he's a bright lad, and actually you see that little smile creep across his face.
He is incredibly bright.
He's exceptional.
Yeah.
Probably that's
that.
why
Like
he's, because of his behaviour issue, he's not encouraged to use his creativity and talent.
There's a lot of talk these days about, you know, trying to get students to be more innovative and trying to get them to be more creative. And I'm wondering about whether being in a group, feeling the security of being in a group, working as a group, that might support that.
I mean, I think it does, particularly for maybe the less able, certainly the less confident student. I think they've got almost the support, the net underneath them, really, of the other students around them. They're not going to make a fool of themselves.
The more able kids are probably more aware of other kids that are less able, and less able kids benefit from working with more able kids.
And it's about preferred learning styles as well, isn't it? I mean, it was really obvious that Demir loves to operate like that, and that was the most involved or motivated that he's been. I mean, he chose to do the subject, he assures me he wants to do it, but that was definitely his preferred learning style.
I don't think that whoever was wearing it would like to walk around in that. People wouldn't think they were very fashionable, so we tried to create something that they could be happy wearing, but at the same time was practical.
It's really renewed, not that I didn't have faith in the students, but that was almost a key thing about not wanting to do group work, is will they muck about, will they actually work, but they love it, and they do, and I have total faith now.
Would they just muck about?
It's almost like, gosh, why haven't I done this before? I mean, I've used it loads. I've started developing peer assessment and self-assessment skills a lot. So working a lot in pairs, and then, well, I suppose because the way my room is laid out, I can start with a pair and then I have a natural four.
Yes.
And that's already been, because I have a seating plan that's already allocated in terms of ability or gender or, you know, those things anyway. It's a very cost-effective use of time in terms of not taking too much out of the lesson. My assessment, the skills they're developing with each other.
It's got a big handle. It's got a big handle. Fingers to stick on it. A big handle.
Also, another point I wanted to ask you about your activity, Sarah, was the idea. I mean, those students, they were confronted with some bizarre objects. How important was it to do that as a group?
They were sparking off each other. You know, one person would say, "Oh, is it this?" and then that might need somebody else to do something. But I think that the questions that each group were asked were very integral to that as well.
The person who had stroke here, how could they use it like with the two hands? That's what I mean. That's why I said it's not successful.
That's what I'm saying. See, you can't do it with one hand.
Exactly, you can't do it.
No, you can't. I can't put it on.
That skill of the ones in my class that stood and present, you know, the presentation. I thought, wow.
And it fits properly on the table. It's completely flat at the bottom. There's no room for a pen, so what we can do that, and the paper fits exactly.
I would not have even thought that they could have
Well, that's a great example about what we're discussing, isn't it? That the group work, they were rehearsing what they were going to say to the rest of the class in the presentation during the group work. And similar, we're doing some of these activities in another authority with Year 11, and the group work activities, they're rehearsing exam answers, and they're engaged and they're motivated by it. But people will say, they'll look at it and say, well, it's too much, I haven't got time to make those preparations. But I think sometimes you can, once you get in the habit of structuring group work, you can do it relatively quickly.
Well, also once students are in the habit of it as well, you know, that it's an accepted sort of way of working.
I'm going to use exactly that. That will be the way that particular project always gets started from now on, which is a much better way of doing it than any other way I've done before.
No, it's good that it's had that impact.
No, I'm just thinking in terms of resources. I mean, you can set a homework where the kids can prepare for the group work for the following week. So they actually engage and participate actively rather than just with the given resources. So they would come with something that is of interest to them or importance to them.
But that other thing that we did in terms of it being an evaluation of product, because we looked at the questions and we did it so those questions were generic, weren't they? So that we could actually use whatever product you want to do. You could use it for textiles, you could use it for food, you could use it for graphics, whatever product. Those questions were generic. And so those sheets can be used just over and over.
The planning, actually, I mean, the resources, you know, I mean, it's a bit of photocopying and, you know, maybe laminating if you want the stuff to have a shelf life. But the planning really was the thinking time. That's what takes the time. But, you know, that's what we all want to have more time to do. But that's actually not, that was the enjoyable bit for me.
It doesn't have to be resourced in a sense. I mean, if students got into that habit of peer assessing their homework at the beginning of a lesson, then that's a group work, just working in pairs. And I think, you know, the teachers that have whole class question and answer with hands up, that could be much more effective, just saying, well, I've asked you a question as a group, rather than just ask for an answer from the person with a hand up. Get into pairs and just talk about it, and then I'll ask you for an answer. And you build in some time, which is essentially group work, even if it's a minute, and then when the hands go up, they're coming up from a position, we've discussed this and this is our answer. I think group work can permeate almost everything we do. I mean, the times I remember from my teaching years where I'd give a sheet out with a design brief on and a context, and then I'd read through it with the class, and you can visibly see people, you know, begin to look out the window. Whereas if you say, right, read it, then get into pairs, and I want a question from each pair about the design project that we're starting. You know, and that's group work, and there's no resourcing there at all, over and above what you'd normally do. My last question really is, we've done this now. I mean, it's been your first way of engaging with the Key Stage 3 materials, but what will the department do now? What will the strategy be on top of this? How will group work figure in the future? I'm
a firm believer in evolution. I think what we've seen here is an evolutionary step in the way teachers teach, and they just need to soak up this kind of stuff and then feel free to utilise it as and when.
What you can do and still keep that sentiment is be aware of what each other's doing. You know, if you know that Jane's been using snowballing with a particular group, you'll know that you could potentially use that quite quickly and quite smoothly with another group if you so wish.
Because I think we found it's a good strategy, you could actually ping it into a lesson, sometimes even just without any planning. But the kids would actually latch onto it. They'd actually know what you were doing.
We're aware of what each other's doing, so we feel confident about it.
The students actually have the skills as well as the teachers.